Pisces, have you ever noticed your inner rhythm quietly shifting? Not because of something obvious, but because of a feeling that's hard to name. Lately, it may seem like something subtle is moving around you, a look that lingers a little longer than usual, a pause that carries more meaning than words, and you find yourself wondering, am I really sensing this, or am I just becoming a bit more sensitive? Some moments in life don't arrive with answers. They arrive to remind us to slow down, to listen more closely to the quiet signals that are present, both around us and within us. And if you're here right now, it might be time to pause for a breath, to gently notice what this emerging feeling is inviting you to experience, beginning with the moment your intuition softly reaches out to you. Pisces, in this life, there are feelings that don't need to arrive loudly to be recognized. They don't come with declarations. They don't demand that you immediately understand or react. They simply arrive, very gently, like a thin wave gliding across the shore, leaving just enough of a trace for you to realize something has been felt. Lately, you may have noticed yourself becoming more sensitive to the smallest details. A glance that lingers a little longer than usual. A sentence left unfinished. A pause that suddenly carries weight. Not because the world around you has changed all that much, but because inside you, a door is slowly opening. Pisces has always lived close to the deeper layers of emotion. But there are certain seasons when intuition becomes clearer than usual. It doesn't speak in words. It doesn't push or rush. It whispers, just enough to slow you down for a moment and invite you to ask what you are truly feeling. You may not be able to name that feeling yet, and you don't have to. Not every experience needs a label right away. Sometimes intuition only asks for awareness, not conclusions. You might find yourself thinking more often about a person, a connection, or a moment that once seemed ordinary. Not because it carries some dramatic meaning, but because it touches something real within you. Pisces often experiences life as a current, always moving, and when that current shifts direction, you are among the first to sense it. Not through logic, but through a feeling that's hard to explain, and even harder to ignore. What matters here isn't what is happening, it's the state you're in to receive it. You're listening to yourself more closely now. You're allowing subtle emotions to exist without rushing to dismiss or explain them away. That is a very quiet kind of growth. A moment when you no longer need certainty and are willing to stay with a feeling even while it's still taking shape. Intuition doesn't arrive to warn you. It doesn't arrive to promise anything. It comes to remind you that you're living in alignment with your inner rhythm. And that in itself is a gift. If right now you feel as though you're standing at the edge of something new, remember, you don't have to step forward just yet. Simply stand still long enough to feel it. Because sometimes that quiet moment when intuition gently reaches you is the softest invitation to begin a deeper journey with yourself. Not everyone reveals their feelings the moment they begin to take shape. Some people choose to hold them back, not out of fear, but because they want to be sure those feelings are real, deep enough, settled enough, before allowing them to step into the light. Pisces, you may be standing very close to a space like this right now. There are no clear explanations, no obvious signals to hold on to, just a quiet sense of presence, one that lets you know something is being carefully kept. That silence is not empty. It carries thought, hesitation, and a quiet kind of respect. Because there are feelings that, when spoken too early, lose their original wholeness. You may notice this in the way someone enters your life. Not more often, but more deeply. In the way their eyes meet yours, then gently look away. And in questions that seem ordinary on the surface, yet carry something more beneath them. Pisces has always been sensitive to emotions that haven't yet been named. You don't need words to understand. You sense it through the energy they carry, through the way they keep just enough distance, as if protecting something personal, something meaningful. This silence is not avoidance. It is a form of listening, listening to oneself, listening to the other person's response, listening to see which direction the feeling may grow toward. And perhaps because of this sensitivity, you find yourself standing in a space that's hard to describe, not quite close, not quite distant. A meeting point where emotion remains untouched, undefined, free from expectation. This kind of space asks for a rare patience. not the patience of waiting for answers. B, but the patience of honoring a process, the process of another person, and your own. Pisces often gives generously through empathy. But in this moment, you are being invited to do something different, to stay with the feeling without pushing it anywhere. There is great value in allowing an emotion to exist without rushing to a conclusion. Because within that undefined space, truth has the chance to reveal itself naturally. If you sense that something around you is being held in silence, trust that you don't need to break it open. No need to question it. No need to demand clarity right now. Just keep your heart steady enough to recognize its presence without letting it disrupt the rhythm of your inner life. Because some emotions, when respected in the right way, will find their own time to speak. And when that moment arrives, you'll understand why this silence was once so necessary. Pisces doesn't listen to the world with ears alone. You listen on deeper levels, where emotion, intuition, and lived experience blend together into a very personal kind of knowing. When someone shifts the rhythm of how they show up, you notice, not because they say something different, but because the energy around them no longer feels the same. A longer pause in conversation, attention drawn to smaller details, a silence that carries things left unsaid. Not everyone picks up on these changes, but for Pisces, they're like gentle ripples moving across still water. You don't need to analyze, you simply know. This sensitivity doesn't come from weakness. It comes from having moved through enough emotional landscapes to understand that people rarely express everything they feel. What matters most often lives between the words, in the way someone chooses to stay or quietly take a step back. You sense this because you don't rush to fill empty space with assumptions. You allow it to remain. And in that presence, truth finds room to reveal itself. Pisces has a rare ability to recognize when a connection begins to shift. Not because it becomes more dramatic, but because it grows deeper. Some emotions, while still in the dark, show themselves in very subtle ways. They aren't ready to be named, yet they're strong enough to influence how two people relate. And you, with your awareness, stand at the edge between what's already clear and what is still forming. At times, this can feel exhausting, because sensing so much also means carrying vibrations that aren't entirely your own. But it is also a gift. A gift that allows you to see what others are still avoiding. What matters is how you choose to use this ability, not to predict, not to draw conclusions, but to understand that every emotion has its own rhythm. When you sense a feeling slowly stepping out of the shadows, it doesn't mean clarity will arrive right away. It simply means you're awake enough to notice the movement. Pisces doesn't need to react to every signal that appears. Sometimes, awareness alone is enough to adjust how you show up, enough to keep your heart open without losing your inner steadiness. You may begin to notice that when you stop trying to figure everything out, your intuition becomes most accurate, not because it gives you answers, but because it helps you ask the right questions. And along this path, you're learning something essential. To trust your ability to feel without letting it pull you out of balance. Because sometimes an emotion stepping out of the dark isn't meant to change everything. It's meant to help you see more clearly how you're connecting with the world around you. Preparing yourself doesn't mean standing still and watching time pass. It doesn't mean placing hope on something that hasn't yet taken shape. And it certainly doesn't mean putting yourself in a state of tension, constantly watching for what might happen next. For Pisces, this kind of preparation carries a different meaning. It's about learning how to create an inner space that's calm enough for emotions to move through without knocking you off balance, not closing yourself off, but not throwing the doors wide open either. Just keeping your inner world soft enough so you don't react too quickly when an unexpected feeling appears. You don't need to understand everything right now. No need to figure out where the emotion comes from, or where it might lead you. Trying to find answers too early can sometimes pull you away from what matters most. The experience unfolding in this very moment. The preparation you're being invited into is the ability to stay with what you feel without rushing to turn it into a complete story. Pisces often has a habit of interpreting things quickly. Your imagination is rich, your heart feels deeply, and at times, those two together can carry you far beyond what's actually happening. But in this season, the value isn't found in how much you understand. It's found in how honest you remain with yourself. You can acknowledge that you feel something without assigning it a grand meaning. You can notice the vibration and still allow yourself to keep your familiar rhythm of life. This is a very deep form of growth, when emotions no longer pull you forward too fast, and you no longer try to control everything. This kind of preparation doesn't ask for action, it asks for presence. Presence with yourself when emotions arrive, presence when you're uncertain, presence even when you don't yet know how to name the experience. You don't need to change your behavior, no need to make decisions, no need to send out any signals. Just stay aware enough not to betray what you truly feel and gentle enough not to harm yourself in the process. There are seasons in life when doing nothing is the wisest choice. Not because you're passive, but because you understand that some things can only reveal themselves when they're not being pushed. Pisces is learning to trust the natural rhythm of emotion, to trust that what needs clarity will become clear at the right time, and what isn't ready doesn't need to be pulled into the light. True preparation is being able to stay open while remaining grounded, not losing yourself, not trading peace for certainty. And when you reach that place, no matter where the emotion eventually leads, you remain with yourself, whole, aware, and complete. Some feelings don't arrive looking for answers. They come because they need to be acknowledged. That's all. They don't ask for an immediate reaction. They don't demand a decision. They don't force you to understand everything in this moment. They simply want to be seen, to be recognized, all to be allowed to say, "I'm here." Pisces has a rare ability to recognize that moment. The moment when a feeling reaches a threshold, no longer wanting to remain hidden, yet not quite ready to step fully into the light. You may sense it in the way a sentence is spoken more slowly, in a gaze that lingers longer than intended, in a brief flash of sincerity within an otherwise ordinary situation. When this happens, your instinct may be to clarify, to understand, to give the feeling a name so you know where you stand. But sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is to not rush to turn a feeling into an answer. There is deep value in allowing an emotion to exist without directing it, without pulling it toward a fixed conclusion. Because when a feeling is free to exist, it reveals its true nature in the most honest way. Oh, Pisces doesn't need to carry responsibility for someone else's emotions. You don't need to become the place where everything is explained or resolved. Your presence, your ability to listen without judgment, is sometimes enough. You may notice that when you stop placing pressure on the moment, the feeling becomes lighter, not because it weakens, but because it's allowed to be what it truly is. You don't need to push it further. You don't need to hold it tightly. Simply allow it to rest where it wants to be. This requires a very subtle kind of steadiness. Not everyone can do this, because people often want to control what they don't fully understand. But Pisces is learning that not everything needs to be controlled. Some experiences only need to be lived through with honesty. When you allow a feeling to be seen without attaching expectations, you create a safe space, not only for others, but for yourself. Within that space, you don't lose your boundaries. You don't close off your heart. You simply stand as an observer with gentleness and awareness. That feeling may grow, it may change its shape, or it may pass through, leaving behind a lesson about connection. Either way, you don't need to decide right now, because sometimes being seen is already the most important step in a feeling's journey. And when you allow that to happen, you give yourself something truly rare, the calm of standing in uncertainty while still holding on to what is sincere within you. Pisces is learning a very subtle lesson. Not every feeling that appears needs to be turned into action right away. And some inner stirrings arrive simply to be experienced, to be listened to, and then allowed to find their own direction at their own pace. Time plays an essential role in this process, not to delay or postpone, but to give emotion the space to take shape naturally. Just as fruit needs enough sunlight to become sweet, feelings need enough lived experience to reveal their true nature. Pisces understands this through intuition, not theory. You sense that when something is still tender, touching it too soon can distort its original truth. Not because you're afraid of being wrong, but because you respect the honesty of the moment. During this phase, you may notice yourself slowing down, less inclined to push yourself to do something each time a feeling stirs. Instead, you allow yourself to stay with the experience, watching it change, little by little. This is a mature kind of patience, not the forced kind, but a quiet trust that what needs clarity will become clear in its own time. You begin to distinguish between emotions that ask for action and those that simply ask to be understood. The difference is delicate, yet it reshapes how you connect with others and with yourself. At times, you may feel pulled in two directions. One part of you wants to move forward, another part wants to remain where you are. Maturity doesn't erase this tension, it helps you live with it more gently. You come to realize that not every question needs an immediate answer, not every signal needs interpretation, and not every feeling requires an instant response. Pisces has a rare ability to sense when silence is needed and when it's time to speak. Not because you can predict outcomes, but because you listen to the rhythm of what's unfolding instead of chasing momentary impulses. When you give emotions enough space to grow, you also give yourself the chance to stand more firmly within the experience. You're no longer swept away by short-lived emotional waves. You learn how to anchor yourself in inner steadiness. Maturity doesn't arrive through effort. It arrives through consistent, honest presence, through allowing emotions to change, even to fade, without labeling that as failure. Because some feelings come only to teach you how to listen more deeply. Some stirrings appear to help you understand your boundaries, and some experiences only need to be lived through for you to grow in how you love. In this season, Pisces is learning to trust the process, to trust that when a feeling is fully ready, it will speak in the clearest language possible. And if it hasn't spoken yet, then that silence carries meaning of its own. You don't need to force anything to happen. You simply continue living honestly, keeping your heart open and allowing time to do its work. Because sometimes the most beautiful part of a feeling is found in the journey of its becoming. Trust doesn't mean placing your entire heart into someone else's hands. Opening up doesn't require you to step beyond your own boundaries. These two can exist together when you're aware enough to tell the difference between connection and self-sacrifice. Pisces often carries a deep capacity to receive. You sense other people's emotions quickly, and it comes naturally to step into their perspective. But because of that, you also need to learn how to keep a space of your own. A place where you don't have to explain, where you don't have to carry, where you don't have to become the support system for every expectation. In this phase, you're being reminded that inner peace is not something to negotiate. It shouldn't be disturbed just to keep the harmony or out of fear of disappointing someone else. You can listen without dissolving into another person. You can care without carrying what isn't yours. You can be present without giving up your inner stability. This doesn't make you distant. If anything, it makes your presence more genuine. Because when you stop trying to become the answer, you allow the connection to exist as it truly is. Pisces is learning that boundaries are not walls. They are outlines that help emotions stay in their rightful place. They don't block love. They protect its clarity. You may have once believed that if you were generous enough, everything would work itself out. But maturity teaches something else. Compassion needs to walk hand in hand with self-respect. Without both, connection becomes heavy over time. You don't need to prove your worth by carrying someone else's emotions. And you don't need to stay in a state that forces you to constantly adjust who you are. Sustainable trust begins when you stop abandoning yourself in any relationship. When you maintain inner steadiness, you enter interactions from a different place, not to fill a void, not to seek validation, but to share experience when and if it feels right for both sides. This gives you a very quiet kind of freedom, the freedom to choose how close you want to be, the freedom to say enough when needed, the freedom to slow down without guilt. And Pisces doesn't need to become the place where every emotion pours out. You have the right to choose how you show up and to choose what truly deserves a place in your inner world. When you can do that, trust no longer feels like a risk. It becomes a balanced exchange where both people are free to be themselves. And within that space, you begin to see that protecting yourself doesn't weaken your ability to connect. It simply allows you to connect from a healthier place. If right now, there's a feeling around you slowly coming into view, allow yourself not to understand it just yet. Not every experience asks for an immediate explanation. Some things only need to be lived with before their meaning reveals itself in its own time. You are not slow because you're not rushing, and you are not lost because you haven't named the feeling yet. You're simply in a season where presence matters more than answers. Pisces often finds itself wondering whether what it's feeling is accurate or not. But sometimes, what's needed isn't precision. It's honesty with the emotion passing through you right now. There's no need to speed up the process, no need to force clarity, no need to push yourself to respond in any particular way. This moment didn't arrive to test you. It arrived to remind you that you're mature enough to stay with what's unfinished without losing your inner peace. There is a quiet kind of courage in allowing yourself to feel without trying to control the outcome, in letting emotions exist without turning them into a burden. When you do that, you give yourself something rare, a space to listen, a space to breathe. A space where you don't have to be anyone other than yourself. Your intuition doesn't guide you with commands. It gently leans you toward your inner truth. And that truth is never in a hurry. If you're standing in front of something new, remember, you don't have to step forward right away. You don't have to turn away either. Just remain still long enough to feel what truly resonates with you. Every feeling that arrives at the right time carries a lesson of its own. Not to change you overnight, but to expand how you see yourself and how you connect with the world around you. And whether that feeling continues or gradually softens, you lose nothing. Because through it, you learn how to remain with yourself more fully than before. Pisces doesn't need to be the answer to life. You only need to continue being someone who listens, who feels, and who honors what is unfolding in its own rhythm. When you allow that, everything finds its rightful place. Not because you control it, but because you trust enough not to resist the natural flow of emotion. And in this moment, remember just one thing. You are moving at the right pace for you. That is enough.